Hey everyone, this video is going to cover section 3.3 from our geometry textbook. So what we're doing is trying to create angles which would give us parallel lines. Okay? So for many of these problems, we need to use the converses of the angle theorems. Okay? So the angle theorems kind of start off with the assumption that the lines are parallel, and then we can determine which angles are congruent or supplementary to each other. The converses would say, all right, well, if we know that these two angles are congruent, or if we know these two angles are supplementary, then we could conclude that the lines are parallel. All right, so in this first picture here, we have two lines M and N, right? The goal is that we want them to be parallel. We need to find a value of X that will do that. You can see in the picture that there's two angles that are labeled, right? This one here is 95 degrees, and this one here is 8x plus 55 degrees. And I can see that those are corresponding angles, right? They're in the lower right position at their intersection. And so the converse says that if these corresponding angles are congruent, if they have the same number of degrees, then that is enough to say that the lines are parallel. So let's create an equation where we set these two angle measures equal to each other. Okay, so we'll write 8x plus 55 equals 95. All right, we'll subtract 55 from both sides. And that will give us 40. And then we'll divide by 8. And that will give us 5. Okay. So if x equals 5, right, imagine that we substituted here. 8 times 5 is 40. And 40 plus 55 is 95. And so both of these angles are 95 degrees. We've got congruent corresponding angles, and that means that the lines are parallel. Right. Question 2 is the same kind of question, except we have to use a different angle relationship. Okay. So we've got this angle right here, 130 degrees, and we've got this angle right there, 200 minus 2x. Okay. Those would be alternate exterior angles. Okay. And we know that if the lines were parallel, then these angles would be congruent, but the converse is also true. If these angles are congruent, then that implies that the lines are parallel. Okay. So like in question number 1, we're going to create an equation where we basically set these two angle measures equal to each other. So 200 minus 2x, we want to equal 130 degrees. Okay. So we can subtract 200 from both sides. That'll give us negative 70. And then we can divide by negative 2, and we would get x equals 35. All right. So that's kind of all that we're doing there. Our next set of questions, let's see, decide whether there is enough information to prove that line M is parallel to line N, right? And if we can prove it, we'll state the theorem. All right, so in question number 3, we've got two angles that are being marked as congruent, okay? And those happen to be corresponding angles. And we already saw in question 1, right, that if you can show that corresponding angles are congruent, right, then that is enough to say that the lines are parallel. So because they're already marked here, right, they're congruent, and so line M is parallel to line N. So we would say yes, right, we do have enough information to prove it, and what we would use is the corresponding angles converse. Okay. All right, question number 4. Okay, so now we've got these two angles, okay, which are congruent to each other. Those happen to be vertical angles. Okay, unfortunately, vertical angles don't really tell us anything about parallel lines. Okay, so we're just going to say no here. Okay. Now the angle relationships that we use when we're dealing with parallel lines are corresponding angles, alternate interior, alternate exterior, and like consecutive interior. We don't use vertical angles to prove anything about parallel lines. And so I say that because look at question number 5, right? If you look at the 2 angles that are marked, right, that would be another set of vertical angles. And vertical angles are just not enough to prove that any lines are parallel. Okay. So we're going to say no again there. Right. And now we get to question 6. And this one is interesting because there's actually 4 lines in total, right? There's 3 lines that look to be going vertically and then 1 line that's going diagonal. Okay. Remember, our goal was to prove that line M was parallel to line N, right? So all we care about is line M, line N, and of course the transversal. Line S is really just there to throw us off. So what I'm going to do, right, is to just grab some white out and cover up that line because we don't really care about it. So we have line M, line N, line R, which is the transversal, and then these 2 angles right here. And so our question should be, well, what type of angles are those? And is it one of those angle relationships that relate to parallel lines? Okay. These are alternate exterior angles. Okay. And yes, this is a relationship that relates to parallel lines. If these angles are congruent, then our lines are parallel. Okay. Or if we knew the lines were parallel, then that would mean that the angles are congruent. It's like it goes both ways. So we'll say yes, right? Having these 2 angle measures, right, allows us to say that the lines are parallel. And we would say that we're using the alternate exterior angles converse. Okay. All right. So the other converses would be, well, so which ones do we use? We use corresponding angles converse. We use alternate exterior angles converse. Here, let's make a list in a different color. So corresponding angles converse, alternate exterior angles converse. There's the alternate interior angles converse. And there's the consecutive interior angles converse. Okay, so if you have a diagram where the corresponding angles are shown as congruent, or the alternate exterior angles are shown as congruent, or the alternate interior angles are shown as congruent, or the consecutive interior angles are shown as supplementary, right? So this is the one unique one, and is that those are supplementary and all these other ones are congruent. Okay, so if you have a diagram which shows congruence in these angles or supplementary angles here, that is enough to say that the lines are parallel. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in our Zoom meeting.